The Lost Frost Girl by Amy Wilson, Chapter 28. I wake to the sound of glass being clawed at, a horrible, thin, tortured sound that makes my ears ache. My breath plumes as I turn my head and look toward the window, a small cloud of ice particles forming in the air. What is that? The sound comes again, and then there's a tap, small but insistent. I shuffle out of bed and lift the curtain to peek out, little prickles of fear running up my spine. There's an owl drawn on in ice on the window, intricate and beautiful, its wings outspread, eyes fierce and determined as it looks in the ground. It reflects the moonlight and glints, so real looking I can't help but reach out a hand to touch it. And then Jack looms out of the darkness, a wicked smile on his face as he leans out from the silver birch that stands in the garden. He beckons. I shake my head, though I can already feel the adrenaline building in my blood. He frowns and reaches out, knocks against the glass a little harder, a little louder. I shake my head more vigorously, but he just raises his eyebrows and knocks again. Stop it! I hiss, terrified that Mom might hear and come in. I mean, what would that be like? Apart from her discovering that I've lied to her far more than she realizes, she'd be face to face with Jack Frost for the first time in over 13 years. I have no idea how that would go. She's always been so accepting of what happened, the fact that she would never see him again. But if she did see him, that would change, wouldn't it? And then what? There's a part of me, a small selfish part, that wants to keep him to myself just for now. Jack begins to fling small pellets of ice at the window just below the owl. What do you want? I mouth at him, another cloud of ice forming in front of my face. He grins. Come out, he mouths. I want to show you something. I grab my boots and my hat and creep down the hall to the front door. All's in darkness. Mom's not working tonight. I feel a horrible twinge of guilt grip me deep in my belly, and I loiter for a moment in the tiny hall looking at Mom's paintings of stags and wolves hanging on the walls. Animals of winter, their stance wary, eyes defiant as they roam in frozen wilderness. She saw those creatures when she was with my father, I realized suddenly. They were in the stories. It's time for me to know him for myself. I grabbed my keys from the shelf and shut the door behind me, pulling on my boots and treading down the steps to the main door as softly as I can. I take my time to unbolt it and venture coatless into the cold November night, my father landing lightly on his feet as he jumps from the trees to meet me. Come, little pretender, he says, whisking me out of the gate and leading me down the silent dark road. You say you like to sketch. Let's see how well you do with my tricks. Jack, wait, I interrupt, looking around for the pale, shadowy figure who's been spying on me. The road is still, nothing moves. Something's been spying on me. There's a plot against you. A plot? He spins around, searching the shadows, little flurries of ice dancing in the air around him, sparking golden beneath the streetlight. Tell me more. He looks delighted. The Queen of May and someone else. I don't know who. They're trying to get rid of you. Be rid of me? What a delightful notion. I am Jack Frost, little owl. They cannot be rid of me so easily as that. But they've been watching me. Now, little owl, he says, this is the night. This is the time for magic. Come away from these petty concerns. They do not worry me in the slightest. Come, I will show you how to make this home of yours a more beautiful place. And he does. He changes the world with every step he takes, with every gesture. The winter wonderland Mom spoke of seems to come alive around us, so that every house becomes a sparkling palace, every street a sweep of dazzling white that catches the starlight and glistens. Jack bounds from pavement to starlight, from pavement to streetlight, over fences and up the narrow skeletal trees, and at his every touch magic spreads. He's wide-eyed and intent on his work, a dart of silver throwing spears of mirror bright ice up into the eaves of every building, spirals that wink and glitter. My feet fly after his, my blood pumping faster, colder through my veins than I am as lost to it as he is, freezing ponds with a touch of my finger, lacing windows in a fine, pale crystal fur. I don't know how far we go. I lose track of the real world after a while, so that the streets that I have trodden all my life are a million miles away. This is his domain, and it is my domain, and it is more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. The night gets deeper, more silent around us as we work, never speaking but connected with every action. And I am wired with this magic, a flutter of pride going through me every time he looks approvingly at what I've done. But gradually exhaustion begins to creep in. We skirt the school and head through some community gardens, and for a while I'm caught up making tiny fern patterns on the greenhouses. But when I turn around, Jack is leaning down, his fingers reaching through the gaps in the protective plastic the gardeners have put over the ground, a fine bloom of ice instantly taking the life out of the vegetables nestled underneath. Something catches within me. The memory of my argument with Mallory stings, and the spell is broken. No! I protest. Why would you do that? It's nature, he says, looking up with a smile. It's part of the cycle of the world, little owl. But it's cruel. Is it really necessary? How else does the world know that it is time to shelter from the winter? But I see the light in his eyes as he does it. He enjoys it. It's like a little act of rebellion or spite. When Mom talked about him, she always made him sound so wise and gentle, despite his strangeness and the treachery of winter. I hadn't imagined that he could be like this here. My footsteps are heavy as I follow into neighboring gardens, rushing along the spikes of a wooden fence, frost cascading from his touch down to the ground. Suddenly there's a commotion in the darkness at the edge of the garden. Trees rustle wildly, and a tall, broad figure appears, stretching up to his full height. He's nearly as high as the tip of the garden shed. I see with shock as he unfolds himself. He must be at least 7 feet tall. Jack! He barks, his voice hard as granite. I recognize that voice. I take a step back, trying to hide my shock, and Jack leaps down from the fence. Ah, bother! Jack says, rising to his full height, still dwarfed by the other man. What is it now, you old grump? He stands straight and square and beckons for me to join him. I swallow a niggle of fear and edge up, standing slightly behind him, looking up into the stern face of a man more peculiar by far even than my father, the man who spoke with the Queen last night. I try to find my voice, try to warn Jack, but nothing will come. The man has pale, mottled skin, like the bark of a silver birch. His eyes are wide and brown, and they would be beautiful, but the expression in them is so hard they only remind me of the knots in wood. His body is long and lean, his limbs gnarled, his hair a riot of oranges and reds and copper browns. Who is this? He asks, stooping with a creak to inspect me. His sharp teeth are gray, his breath bitter-sweet like rotting fruit. I shudder despite myself, and his hollow eyes gleam. Who is this creature, Jack, that you share your antics with? She is of no concern to you, Jack snaps. Only a sprite, that's all. A sprite, you say? Do you think me stupid? That is no sprite, Jack. Why are you here? Jack demands, squaring up to the man. This is not your domain. Autumn stretches far longer than you have ever allowed for, the man says with a tight smile. As long as you dance through the fallen amber leaves of my doing, I may remain abroad, Jack. It is you who must account for things. I need not explain myself to you, Jack says firmly, folding his arms. Very well, says the man. Then you may come to the royal court on the 21st, Jack, 2 days from now, midnight. He reaches out and touches Jack on the forehead with a long, gnarled finger. You have been summoned. Jack leaps back, outraged, shoving me backward. I fall easily, all my strength giving out at the appearance of the new figure. Jack curses and reaches out a hand, and I notice it shakes as it grips mine. Up, he says. Do not fall before these creatures. But when we look around, the man has gone. And there was the Earl of October, Jack says in a dry tone, embittered by lack of power and prestige, far too concerned with human notions of respect. But it was him, Jack. He was the one plotting with you with the Queen, and now he's seen us together. Oh, won't that be bad? I should have said something when he was here. Are you in trouble because of me? He looks surprised. Well, that is interesting. I wonder what he thinks he has over me. He looks in the direction that Earl left and gives a shrug. Ah, I am in trouble several times a year. It is nothing I cannot deal with. Now come, little owl. It's nearly time for your human day to start. Whatever he may say, the encounter has shifted something in him. He's silent as we walk home, keeping to the shadows as the leaden dawn begins to break. He salutes me goodbye at the door as I step inside, and when I look back to watch him walk away, his head is lowered, his footsteps barely more than a mist on the ground. At least something is going my way. I managed to get myself back into the apartment and into bed without alerting Mom. There seems a lot to worry about, but each thing is like a darting minnow. I can't get a hold of anything to consider it properly. I've never known before quite what it meant to be bone tired. It means you're bone tired, as in every bone tired. Chapter 29. When I awake, it's after 11. Mom put a cup of tea down by the bed, and when I reach out, it's still warm. I sit up, pulling the curtains aside and huddling into the quilt, drinking my tea, watching the sun make the frost sparkle on the rooftops opposite. The owl on the window is no longer there, I realize with a little pang. Everything Jack does is so temporary. I drag my laptop down from the desk and look up sprites. Of all the things that have happened, it's the bit that sticks with me. Jack said it so dismissively. She's only a sprite. Mostly the word had been hijacked by the soft drink. I scroll down impatiently and find this definition. A small otherworldly figure mentioned in folklore, part of the fae or fairy domain. I suppose that's not an insult, and I know he was only saying it to cover his tracks. But why was the Earl of October so pleased to have caught him out? What can they do to him for being found with a half human? A half human. I look down at myself. A human with extras, that's what I am. Mom takes me out for a walk. I feel like a dog called to heel. She watches me closely the whole time as we trudge through the browning snow, heading for the canal. All too clearly, I see the traces of my father's antics last night, and in some of the patterns in the river, I can even see my own. Mom tries to start a conversation several times, but I'm too tired and distracted, and eventually she gives up, putting her arm through mine instead. I let it stay there. Then we go to Mallory's on the way home, so my mom can catch up with hers, which is a bit awkward, since Mallory and I are not exactly on speaking terms. She stares at me across the hallway for a moment, while our mothers head to the kitchen, and I stare back, folding my arms. I know I made mistakes, not telling her things sooner, but she was the one who threw me out. Eventually she sighs and gestures to the stairs. You look even more tired than yesterday, she hisses as I trail behind her. She manages to look concerned and furious at the same time when she glances back. You should slow down a bit. She reaches out and pulls me up the last few stairs. I mean, I'm sorry if it sounds harsh, Owl. I'm just trying to look out for you. I know you are, I answer, closing her bedroom door behind us, hearing a soft murmur of our mothers talking downstairs. I get it. I just don't know what I can do about it. I mean, do you want to know stuff or not? I can't have another argument. I'm just too tired. I can see that, she says, sitting with me on the bed, her fingers absently playing with the hem of her t-shirt. No more arguments. What have you been up to this time? I tell her about the Earl of October and the plot against Jack and the summons to the royal court. Her eyes get brighter as I talk, and I don't know whether she truly believes it all, but she's always loved a good adventure, in spite of her more sensible self, and suddenly I know just how to fix everything between us. So, this royal court thing, that's tomorrow night? She asks when we finish. Yep. I take a deep breath and plunge ahead. Do you want to come? I need to go, just in case they can help Jack. I might be the only one who knows about this plot. Avery told me to meet him in the old Druid Wood. I don't know quite where, but I'll get Avery to tell me, and then we can go together. With Avery? Sheesh. I don't know, but that's not the point. Do you want to come or not? Yes, definitely, she says, biting her lip. What's the problem then? It's just. It's hard for me to imagine it all. Is this really happening, Owl? If you're really Jack Frost's daughter, what does that actually mean? I close my eyes and think of last night out with Jack, how the power builds inside and then unfurls slowly. I focus on the tingling in my arms and legs, feel it sweep out all around me. When I open my eyes, Mallory is open mouthed with shock. In the bed is a bright moon ship out in a sea of frost, great shards of ice sweeping up all around us almost to the ceiling. The quilt is a deck of pale frozen flowers that gleam beneath the bedroom light, which has been transformed into a shimmering chandelier. Tier after tier of clear, sparkling ice scatters the light in 1,000 rainbow reflections, and glittering crystals hang down, tinkling gently. Owl! Mallory chokes eventually, after what seems like hours. You wanted to see, I whisper, as the feeling gets stronger and the ceiling begins to creak, icicles forming over our heads. Yes, but. She reaches forward and picks up one of the flowers, her eyes like saucers as she holds it in her hands. But look at this. Look at you. Yes, I know. It's just. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you. It's awesome. Can you stop it? She asks, her voice breathless, wiping her hand on her leg as the flower melts. I mean, she looks up at the twisting spear like icicles. Maybe before they fall? I have to concentrate really hard to let the feeling go. It feels like I'm winding in a web of needle sharp silver trying to contain something that doesn't want to be contained at all. It takes more effort than it did to show her in the first place. The frost doesn't disappear for a while either, and I feel this strange mixture of pride and desperation because that feeling, when I'm doing it, that feeling is like pure joy, and now I'm without it. Now I'm just sitting here being stared at by my best friend while ice melts around us. So, I ask after a while, my voice shaking. I get it, she says. I think I get it. Are you coming then? Yes, she says, running a finger through the frost on her headboard. Will your mom let you? After the other night? No, I say. I'll have to sneak out. Are you up for that? Absolutely, she says. But what's wrong? You look awful. It's tiring, I say. And you staring like that makes me feel weird. Also, I've kind of made your room wet. Oh, it'll be okay. I'll chuck some towels around in a bit, she says. Don't worry about that. And I'm sorry for staring. It's not because it's weird, Owl. It's because it's magical. I snort. She sounds like a 5-year-old. Then she shoves at me and I shove her back and we're laughing and we're us again, even if the conversation is different now. I just hope it's the right thing to take her. I know it's the right thing for me, for our friendship. I'm just not sure how good it'll be for Jack. I mean, if he's in trouble for hanging out with a half human, how's it going to fare if I take a whole one along with me for his royal court appearance? We make our plans anyway, and then the subject strays onto Mallory's parents, and I see how desperate she is about them, how hard she's trying to lose herself and other stuff, because there's nothing she can do to fix their problems. It'll be good for her to come. If I can get Avery to tell me where the royal court meets, that is. Avery still looks tired when he walks into homeroom in the morning. He gives me a quick half smile before marching over and sitting at his usual desk, glaring at Connor when he arrives and starts being deliberately annoying, flapping his coat around and taking an age to sit down. Avery doesn't look very happy, does he? Mallory whispers as Mr. Varley bursts into the room and starts shouting at Connor for being a clown. Connor is unfazed as usual. He just grins and takes his seat, and then he looks across and winks at Mallory, who goes a very interesting shade of pink. Ooh, Connor's happy to see you, though, I say with a grin. She raps me on the knuckle with a pencil. I can feel Avery's gaze boring into me for the whole of the class, though every time I turn around he's looking straight ahead at Mr. Varley. I loiter outside the classroom when the bell has gone, waiting for him. Hi, I say, standing in his way. He looms over me. Hi. Is everything okay? I ask. He looks completely surprised by that question. I mean, the other night, you were a bit stressed out. I'm fine, he says. Have you told Jack what you heard? Yes, I say. Honestly, he didn't seem that worried. And we met the man who was speaking. I don't suppose he's really a man at all. Actually, more of a creature, the Earl of October. He stares at me. You met the Earl? What's the problem? Nothing. He looks away. Just the Earl has a bit of a reputation. He's not so keen on the human interactions. Well, I only saw him for a moment. Then I told Jack he was the one scheming, and now the Earl has summoned Jack to the royal court, and I promised I'd be there. A bunch of kids swarm around us as we pass through the main entrance, breaking my concentration. So yes, I said I'd meet him there, but he didn't tell me quite where to go. Seems strange if he wanted you to be there, Avery says as we get to the history wing. Well, he is who he is. I shouldn't tell you. But I could swear on a tree never to tell you. Or, I look around desperately. On a book, perhaps? Made of the same material, essentially? As the great oak? He shakes his head. You're such a beginner. I hesitate outside the classroom door while people start heading in. I need to be there, I say, putting my hand out to stop him. He's rolled up his sleeves and his forearm is covered in minuscule golden freckles. I'll be careful. What do you think you can do there anyway? I know the truth. I know they're scheming against him. If it all goes wrong for him, then I'll be able to explain. It's not a good idea, he says. It'll be fine, I insist. I won't do anything unless they really have to. Besides, don't I have a right to be there just as much as you do? His nostrils flare as he considers me. I can't help you, he says finally, looking down at my hand on his arm with a strange expression. I remove it hurriedly, giving myself a mental slap for being so weird. I'm sorry, just can't. You don't know what you're walking into. With that, he strides away ahead of me into the classroom, leaving me gaping stupidly after him, completely stung by his response. Maybe it's not such a good idea to go to the royal court, or to take Mallory for that matter, but I am not about to let him stop me. What a jerk! We'll just have to do it without him. I can't let Mallory down now. She needs the distraction. It can't be that hard to find, and I need to see it, whatever it might be like. A little shiver of apprehension breaks out on my skin as I settle myself in my usual place. Avery just in front of me, and I keep my coat on for the whole class, just in case it shows. I can't believe we're doing this, Mallory whispers as she meets me in the street, her breath puffing out in the cold night air. I've never done something like this before. Not sure many people have, I say with a smile as we start walking. I feel really nervous. Avery was so weird about it earlier, it made me worry. Several times I slow down, wondering whether to tell Mallory we should go back. We still don't know where the royal court is meeting, and the old druid wood is enormous. But she's charging on by my side, wrapped up in a heavy coat, a scarf, a hat, and boots with thick socks, happily chatting about whether we're going to see any real pixies or elves. I guess she's thinking of fairy tales. I don't think it's going to be quite like that, I hiss as we hike into the sloping field between the school and the forest. The ground is hard with a crisp white frost. I look at my watch, 11:45 p.m. It's so cold, Mallory says, slipping as she tries to hurry up the hill. I guess you don't feel it, but man, Mallory, shh, I whisper, my voice tight as we get closer. The trees cast long shadows in the light of the moon, which is just past full now. I don't know what this is going to be like. It might be dangerous. Maybe you should wait. What? All alone in the dark in this field? She hisses. Not likely. I want to meet your dad anyway. Jack Frost, she intones. I'm not sure I want to see him, though. I'm not sure I'm ready for this royal court thing at all. Having seen Jack in the North Wind and the creepy Earl of October, I can hardly imagine what the rest of them will be like. We reach the edge of the trees, and I look around furtively, but I can't see much in the darkness. How are we going to find it? Mallory demands, tripping over dry twigs. It's so dark. I've half a mind to turn around right there and pretend none of this is happening at all. But just as I go to say it, a tall figure steps behind us and grabs us both by our arms, dragging us further into the tangled undergrowth beneath the trees. Chapter 30. Have you completely lost it? Avery barks at us, shoving us into the shelter of an enormous ash tree. Do you know what you're doing, coming here? I said I was coming, I retort, and I was hardly coming alone. Besides, surely everyone's allowed into the woods. It's public land, after all, chimes in Mallory. Avery stares at her. She stares back. It's not safe, he says, his eyes roaming, searching the woodland around us. This isn't some cozy fairyland. Humans aren't allowed at the royal court. You might get away with it, he says, looking at me, but I'm not sure it's even possible for Mallory to get there. And if you're here for Jack, it's about the worst thing you could do to bring her with you. Well, we're here now, I say, folding my arms, and I'm guessing you're not the king of the wood, so you've no choice in it. You should go. We'll make our own way. You didn't want to be seen with her, remember? He draws me to one side. Seriously, Owl, stop this. It's not safe for either of you, especially not for Mallory. He looks me up and down, his eyes softening. Even you won't be able to fight them off if they discover you. Would they really attack us? I don't know, he says, shifting his feet, his eyes constantly on the lookout. I don't know what will happen. I just know some of them won't like it. And as I say, she might not even get through. Get through where? There's a barrier. A spell, I suppose. It stops humans from seeing what they're not supposed to see. So she'll be there, but she won't see anything. I don't know. He hisses, his shoulders tense. I don't know what will happen. Are you really willing to risk it? The branches of the trees rustle around us, and there's a low scurrying noise. Things stirring in the undergrowth. Avery looks back in the deep darkness of the woods. The trees are waking, he whispers. Go home, Owl. There's nothing for you here. His eyes blaze, and the trees around us lower their branches with a shuffle and a cascade of leaves, snapping upright once more when he waves his hand at them with a frustrated huff. Please, he says, this isn't a place for humans. Just go. And with that, he's off, darting through the trees as if he's been doing it all his life. He probably has, I think, with a shudder as I turn back to Mallory. Wow, what was that? With the trees. Did he just do that? Did they bow to him, Owl? Is this place really full of strange creatures? She asks, her voice hushed. I did try to tell you, I whisper, a knot forming in my stomach as I look around us. The trees seem closer together now. They're so tall, they could be endless. The light is dim already, and farther in, darkness clings to every limb. We tread through thick undergrowth in the direction Avery went, trying to steer clear of the trees. It gets darker as we go, and the night sounds grow louder. The movement of unseen creatures, the creak of the trees in the wind. I forge through, Mallory following, her hand on my jacket. My eyes are quick to adapt to the darkness, every sense on alert. But Mallory blunders behind me, her breath quick and hard. Ow! She hisses suddenly, as a whisper of wind breaks over my skin. Mal? I turn as she breaks away from me, blinking and searching out with her hands. Where are you? Right here. I can't see you, she says, panic edging her voice. I take a step toward her, feel that same whisper against my skin. It's so dark, Mallory breathes. I don't think it's that, Mallory, I say, searching for a sign of the barrier. It's invisible, whatever it is. It's a spell meant to hide the royal court from humans. Can you get through? I step back through the barrier and pull her with me, but her hands are ripped from mine as she bounces back. Oh my goodness, I whisper, helping her up. Mallory, it's not going to let you through. So I'll wait for you here then. You go on. She looks very pale as she says it, though her jaw is set with determination. I can't do that, Mal. Yes, you can, she says, her voice stronger. I've got a flashlight and my personal alarm and a bit of chocolate. I'm not sure. Seriously, I will go. This is important. I'll be fine. I'll just sit in this pile of leaves here. She shuffles them together and plonks herself down in the middle and eat my chocolate. I stand for a few minutes watching her, making sure she's okay, and when I can see she's absorbed in a game on her phone, I force myself to go on through the barrier. The creaking of trees is louder on the other side, and there's a charge in the air, as if the whole place is alive with magic. By the time I come out into a small clearing, the telltale tingling of my skin has started. I look down at my hands to see they're covered in frost that glitters beneath the clear moonlight. And then I look up, and any doubt I might have had about everything that happened disappears, blown to pieces by the scene that's unfolding before me. Chapter 31. Fables and Earth Spirits. The Lady of the Lake. Deep down in the murk of the underwater, the girl thought she was drowning. She thought that she had taken a wrong turn somewhere in the incantation, and her adventures in the magical lands of the Fey folk were over. Her chest burned as she breathed in water, and she fought to push herself up to the surface, but she fought in vain. Her feet were tangled in the rough, grasping roots that twisted through the riverbed. No, child, forget your struggles, came a voice, and it seemed that it rang within her head, and there was a bright light, and she thought that surely this was the end. Then pale hands clutched her shoulders and pulled her forward through the water until, with a kiss that broke upon her face, the underbelly of the lake revealed itself to her, a vast bubble of air within the water, and within that bubble such a place that for an instant she wondered if she had perished after all, and this was heaven. She stood in a puddle of water, breathing hard and so very aware of her sorry, bedraggled state, and she could find no words to explain herself, though the question was in the eyes of all the assembly before her. They were fairies and water sprites and other taller creatures that she could not name, with gills upon their slender necks. Their glittering skin was bright beneath the chandeliers that dangled from the roof of the cavernous hall. Quartz had made this place, and a million points of pink light shone out from every corner. Well, child, and what mischief have you found yourself in this time? Came the voice once more. Come forward to me, I would see your face. The otherworldly figures parted to reveal a pale marble throne, upon which sat a pale lady more beautiful than words could ever tell. The girl forgot that she had nearly drowned, forgot her dripping hair, her chilled skin, for the lady was heat and light and peace. I have heard of you, she said with a gentle smile. You are our traveler, our human interloper. You shall find trouble sooner or later if you carry on with your little spell. I wonder how you came by it. The lady looked at her straight in the eye, and in that moment it was as if she had read the whole of her being. It does not offend me to have you here, she said, almost as if surprised by that. She waved an elegant wand at the crowd, and it dissipated. Will you write of your adventures, traveler? She asked when they were alone. The girl could only stare. She could no more think of writing at that moment than she could have wielded a fish to fight a sword. I think perhaps you should, the lady said to her silver eyes bright with the thought. Write it and hide it well, and we shall see if your adventures one day might have a purpose. They say all things have a meaning. She stepped forward over the pale shell floor and then was in front of the girl. She stooped and breathed upon her. Now, she said, be gone, and if you should continue with your travels, take heed of my warning. Not all will welcome you. Chapter 32. Mom's read those legends all my life. about the figures who watch over nature, about the beauty and the danger of the elements. But they were bedtime stories and they never frightened me. Those fairy tale characters were magical, vivid beings who lived in another world, a world of books and movies and imagination. They weren't living, real creatures, except they were, and they're right before me now. The trees have opened out into a clearing that dips down to a lake I've never seen before. It's like the whole place has been transported from Mom's old storybook. The water is still, shining silver beneath the moon, and all around it, between pale globe lights that rise out of the moss covered ground, are strange, almost human figures that my mind is fighting to accept. The Earl of October sits on a great stone bench overlooking the lake, his long knotted limbs all awkward angles. Next to him sits a curvy woman in a hooded robe, her green eyes glinting like metal as she looks around the gathering. Beside her is an old man, thick set and dark skinned, his iron gray hair in matted strands standing up around his head. On the other side of the earl is a tiny woman, perhaps a sprite, her knees drawn up to her chest, and a man hardly bigger. He turns to talk to her, and I notice with a shudder that his teeth are mirror bright and sharp as knives. Gathered around the edge of the lake are dozens of other figures. Most of them are sprites, like the tiny figures on the bench, their skins sparkling in the light in shades of green and tawny brown. There are more of the shadowy goblins and other pale winged creatures, perhaps fairies in the branches of the trees, their faces sharp, bright hair standing out around their heads in wild ringlets. They're beautiful and somehow terrible, too. The air rings with a cold steel as they move from one tree to another with a blur of silver wings. The trees themselves are no more comforting, standing tall and slender all around the court, moving in apparent conversation with each other, roots twisting beneath the earth, branches sweeping low in strange, almost human gestures. Deep in the undergrowth, other creatures stir. A hedgehog and what I think might be a weasel, its eyes gleaming in the darkness. As I watch, spellbound, a giant white owl swoops down over my head toward the clearing, landing on the lake in ghostly grace, its talons outspread. And then a pale woman with long silver hair rises through the water, the owl perched on one narrow wrist. The lady of the lake, it must be. She stares around the clearing, and there's a sudden stillness. Many of the figures lower their heads at her arrival, though I notice the earl doesn't, and neither does the woman sitting next to him. We are met, she says, her voice carrying easily through the clearing. All but the one summoned, I see. He'll be here, the earl says, his tone clipped. He wouldn't miss the chance to be the center of attention. Avery! My breath gets stuck in my throat as Avery steps forward out of the gloom at the far end of the lake. His head is lowered, his shoulders round as he's trying to disappear into the earth itself. Yes, my son has been acting on our behalf in the human world, says the earl to the gathered crowd. So what have you got for us? His cold eyes flick up and down, Avery dispassionately, and Avery shifts his feet, keeping his eyes on the ground. He's the earl's son? My heart thumps and a sheen of frost spreads instantly over my limbs. It won't compute. He must have known when we spied on him. That was why he stumbled and ran away. He didn't want me to hear what he was saying. And then later, when I told him I'd met the Earl, he said nothing. Nothing except that Earl wasn't a fan of humankind. Come on, speak up, shouts someone from the edge of the lake. What have you learned from your time at the human school? A smattering of laughter bursts out around the clearing, though the lady in the lake does not smile, her eyes hard on the earl before shifting to Avery. Tell us what you have found, she says gently. We must know if we are to make decisions. Avery trains his eyes on the lady, and when he speaks, his voice is clear. She is modestly talented. She has some of his traits. She exhibits some signs of them in public, though not enough of that has been noticed. She is unusual. I can barely stand still, I'm so furious. He lied to me. Over and over, he pretended to be interested, to be my friend. He poured all that doubt on my stories of spies, and it turns out he was the biggest spy of them all. All this time, he's been getting information, working for his father. This cannot be happening. I cannot have been this much of an idiot. No wonder he didn't want me to be there. Unusual, barks the Earl. I should think so, being who she is. She can hardly be a standard human, can she? And yet she does not belong with us either. Avery flinches, looking down at the ground again. Does her power grow? Can she control it? The lady asks. I don't know, he says. There is no. There is no. He runs his hand through his hair, clears his throat. She is powerful, a bit chaotic, but there's no reason to think she would be a danger either here or there. That is not for you to judge, the Earl says in a harsh voice, gesturing for Avery to return to the shadows. Thank you, Avery, says the lady. We must discuss this carefully, my dear Earl. We cannot disappear a human easily. Disappear a human? An icy shudder rolls over me, but I plant my feet firmly into the cold ground, determined to hear this out, determined to help Jack if I can. At least he hasn't lied to me. Of course, there will be careful discussion, my lady, the Earl says. As leader of this cycle, I shall endeavor to ensure every law of this royal Fey court of Mother Earth is upheld, and that every obligation is satisfied. The lady turns slightly from him, her expression unreadable. I try to breathe normally, increasingly aware of how vulnerable I am here, how easily it would be for someone to spot me in the shadow of the trees. I shift my weight to the growing numbness in my feet, and my elbow grazes the outermost branch of a huge oak tree behind me. The owl lifts its head and looks directly into my eyes. My heart swells as it studies me, and I find myself taking a step toward the lake as the tree behind me shifts into me. I spin, my heart hammering in my chest to see the roots and branches of the oak gathering together with impossible speed, forming a great oaken giant of a man. Green man, the lady calls, I hear you stirring. Come join us. There are more interesting creatures than me with us today. The strange tree figure rumbles behind me, reaching out and grasping me at the waist between his thickened, twisted fingers. I have a stray here. What creature is this? I shriek and try to escape as he steps forward with me, holding me at arm's length as if I smell bad. A gasp rolls through the crowd gathered below, and I notice a sparkle in the Earl's eyes. He looks delighted, and I realize that somehow my being here has only made things better for him. I fight harder to get away from the green man as we near the lake. People part to make way for the lumbering tree figure, and toward me, as I kick him, the owl rises from the lady's wrist, coming toward me on silent, powerful wings. It circles the green man, getting closer and closer until he's forced to stop. What is it? He grumbles. Do you not like my prisoner? He looks at me with hollow eyes, and I cannot make out the expression in them all. She does not look like a terrible danger to me. The owl flaps harder, blowing my hair back from my face. She looks at me, and I am caught there, in the blink of her eye, in a moment so vast, so full of possibility that I can hardly breathe. And then the green man staggers back, and the spell is broken. Bye, he roars. Night creature here, you may have her. He thrusts me onto the ground, and the owl stops her silent attack, gliding back to the lady, who has been watching it all with just what might be humor on her narrow face. So, she says, looking me up and down as I hurry to my feet, feeling exposed and a bit horrified at having been hurled around by a tree. You must be the daughter of Jack Frost. I am, I say, my voice wobbling but carrying quite nicely given the circumstances. And what is your given name? I glance at the owl, who blinks her enormous owl eyes at me. Courage, Owl. I'm called Owl, I say. There's a commotion in the crowd. I back away, wondering if I can just run, but the Earl stands, raising his long arms. The woman next to him doesn't move, a muscle, but her eyes glint as she watches me. Enough! Shouts the Earl, clapping his hands together, a flurry of autumn leaves cascading from the trees. This is the royal court! There shall be order here! Girl! He turns to me, face tight with rage. Do you dare to stand there and lie to us all? I'm not lying, I retort, flinching as he claps his gnarled hands together. Avery! Yes, Father. Avery looks more stooped than even before as he steps forward. You knew of this name? Yes, Father. And you did not tell us? I did not see the significance, mumbles Avery, his face flushed. She's named after our herald, the Earl roars. She is connected to it. The owl is our friend, dear Earl, says the lady smoothly. She means us no harm. And if she is connected to the girl, what does that matter? We were not about to harm her, were we? She is the danger, says the woman next to the Earl in a smooth melodic voice that seems familiar, staring at me. Avery has told us she is chaotic, and above all else, she is clear evidence that Jack has forgotten his place in the world. Did you speak of me? Says a voice behind me. Jack steps forward as if he's been here all along. Perhaps he has, I think, looking at the pinched expression on his face. Though he's dwarfed in height by some of the others here, his presence is far greater. The air around him springs cold and bright with his power. Shall we begin, old friend? This is no child of mine. It is not possible. Her only crime is delusion, and her connection to the bird may well explain her peculiarities. My heart twists pitifully and painfully in my chest. He's so harsh. There's no doubt, no question in his voice. He dismisses me as though I truly am nothing to him, even after the time we've spent together. The connection to the bird is not the issue here, says the lady in an acid tone. If anything, it is a good thing. Perhaps she is wiser than some of us. Jack, you are mistaken. Look at the girl. She is more clearly yours than Avery is his father's. The crowd of figures around the lake begins to talk loudly. Some of them are truly outraged at my presence, and most seem at least a little flustered. Avery lifts his head just slightly, though he won't look in my direction. If he did, I might decide to try out my laser ice eyes. I might have them. They would be useful in this situation. I can't believe he's been spying on me. I can't believe how much it hurts. Silence! Shouts the Earl after a moment, standing to full height, his skin mottled with rage. We all know of my previous indiscretion. I was punished for it. 2 years of long solitude. I paid my debt, and Avery has served us well over the years. He refuses to look at his son. Instead, his dark, glinting eyes are focused on me and my father. Besides, I am not one of the elementals, though autumn is my charge. It is forbidden for them to consort with humans in any way. This is a most heinous crime, and one that I demand is met with like Punishment. There's a swell of agreement in the crowd. Jack and I stand in the midst of it now, and he's like a storm beside me, the very air freezing around us. What does that mean? The lady asks in a calm voice. What would you do? He must be banished. It is his season, and he is Jack Frost. We cannot banish him just as winter begins. A crafty look comes over the Earl's face, though he is quick to assume a neutral expression, one of humility almost. It is not an easy decision, he says. We all know of Jack's power, of the importance of his job, but he has grown arrogant over the years. He does not work to serve Mother Earth. He does it for his own pleasure and pride. Evenings spent dancing on ice, splintering windows just because he can. These things cannot go unpunished forever. What do you think? What do you charge me with? Jack says and asks in a leaden voice. With being myself. It is not a crime. I am not a servant to mankind or to order. I am not some fussing minor character bent on nothing more than gaining power over my peers. What power I have is mine, given to me by Mother Earth herself. I am who I am, what I am. Winter's edge is pitiless as it makes its way across the world. Without all, the world would perish. No matter what else is said, the woman next to Earl puts in as she lowers her hood, palest pink hair falling to her waist. You have broken one of the fundamental laws of the royal court, Jack. You have consorted with humanity. You have created a creature half human and half of yourself. She shoots me a venomous look, and I feel a shock of recognition. That pink hair, that voice. She's the Queen of May, the one we overheard talking with the Earl that day. She's behind this, and she's not about to let it go now. It cannot go unmarked, she continues. Chaos would ensue. If the north wind could spawn children, if the morning star had a flock of his own, the world would change forever. There are murmurs of assent. I close my eyes and pinch myself, but the sense of magic is still thick in the air, and my father beside me is a physical manifestation of the most glacial rage there ever has been. I did no such thing, he protests. Why, Jack, asks the lady, why do you persist in this lie? Have you not seen it for yourself? Look upon her. Have you ever seen such a creature? He turns his eyes to me. My heart thuds as he looks me up and down, his silver eyes cool and assessing. I try to stay calm, try not to care one way or another, but there is no recognition there, not a sign he cares for me at all. It wells up inside me and breaks, tears sliding down my cheeks to land as tiny ice crystals at my feet. It is impossible! It isn't possible! He bursts out, thin-lipped and pale with outrage, looking back at the lady. I was made for only one thing. His voice grows bitter. I was made to herald winter, to travel the world alone, spreading the message that it was on its way. I have no mortality. I cannot create life. The lady breaks in, and I think she's saying something about change, but Jack isn't listening. He's staring at me again, his eyes glittering, his hair thick with ice, and I don't hear her either. I'm too busy wondering if he's changing his mind. A vote, I think, breaks in the Earl. Let us vote. Whether or not Jack will admit fathering this creature is irrelevant. He is not a character to be trusted either way, and that much he has proven well over the centuries. We can all see the truth here. Raise your hand if you consider him guilty of this crime. Jack says nothing. He folds his arms and looks up at the sky as if he could care less. But wait! My breath unleashes with a flurry of ice, and everything stops. Everything is still around me. I didn't mean to speak, and yet here it is. My blood races as I realize this is the moment. This is a moment I could change things. 1,000 inhuman eyes are all fixed on me, most of them unfriendly. I focus on the lady. They have all plotted against him. They've been planning this all along. How dare you! Shouts the Earl, standing to his fullest height, his fists clenched at his sides. He takes a great thumping step toward me, his narrow mottled face contorted with rage. How dare you interrupt the proceeds of this royal court, you! My dear Earl, chides the lady, she is a child. She is Jack's child, as you have charged her. The children of humans have no voice in the royal court, says the queen, her voice calm despite a sudden blaze of color through her cheeks. Her pink hair whips out around her face. If she must be here, then she must be silent. But this is what you wanted, I shout, fear turning into adrenaline, spiking through my veins, running icy fingers through my hair. You and stop this, demands the Earl in a cracking voice. He takes a deep breath and steps back to the bench, lowering himself with a creak and folding his arms. Enough! I have charged the royal court with Jack's fate. We cannot let this creature stand in the way of that. Nor will we, says the lady, her voice suddenly weary. Let us proceed. Sit, child. He is right. You have no sway here. Jack puts his hand on my arm, but I refuse to look at him. He didn't fight at all. He just stood there and let them shut me up. I risk a look at Avery, who cannot help but meet my eye. He bites his lip and shrugs. His hands shoot up in the air, in the air from all directions. Sprites, fairies, even some of the trees thrusting forward pale, twisted branches. Far, far too many to be outvoted. Jack is going to be banished, and there's nothing I can do about it. Look what you did! I howl at Avery in my mind, blinking back tears. He lowers his head. It is done, the Earl says with a sigh of relief. The Queen is silent behind him, but the look on her face is of pure delight. You cannot banish me, Jack roars, striking forward down the bank to the lake. My lady, you cannot let this happen. The water begins to freeze as he storms toward it, and the lady takes a step back. Jack, she says, you are hiding from yourself. If you cannot see the truth in the charges, how may I help you? How may you be defended? The Earl is in power still, and the vote has been cast. You have left your protest too late. No! He shouts. This is my time. You cannot cast me out. Are you so blind? Do you not see how important my work is? We will find a way around it, the lady says, her voice growing tight as ice rolls out like smoke around her. Accept this, Jack, and return to your domain. It will not be forever. I will not, he says, fixing his eyes on the Earl. He takes another step forward onto the frozen lake as storm clouds swirl overhead and tiny daggers of hail begin to fall. The owl takes flight, and the lady brings her hands down hard onto the ice, splintering it into great chunks that fly up into the air around Jack, who flounders in suddenly turbulent waters. I have a fond regret for thee, the lady says to him in a low voice that makes the air shudder. But you are not in power when you step into my territory. You have been charged and found guilty. Now go! She brings her arms together, and the waters rage around him until he is forced to drag himself out, pale and bedraggled. I race toward him, straining to see through hail and snow, my shoulders hunched against it. But he glances at me and puts out a restraining hand. Not now, he says, his voice tense. I must go where I am bid. He gives me a fleeting whisper of a smile. Fly while I am gone, little owl. Remember all I have shown you and have no mercy, for the world is a cruel place, and that is necessary.
Life cannot flourish without a fight.
Where's your fight? I ask, ignoring the rest of the royal court, ice forming with every step I take. My skin glitters in the murky moonlight, and my heart is sinking, for I found him and now will lose him, and still he hasn't acknowledged me, even after all this. He will just leave me here with all the strangers who call me creature, as if I'm cursed and wrong. Won't you fight to stay, to do your work for me? He moves close, his voice low. The ground is white around us, even as the hail dies away. Fingers of frost stretch from my feet to his, meeting and blooming in the middle, spreading out across the grass to meet the restless roots of nearby trees.
I cannot stay. They will not allow me. If I fight for you, then we are both lost. You cannot be mine. It is not possible.
But you remembered her when I talked to you before. You remembered the dark haired woman who is my mother.
She was a dream sent to fill one lonely day of many, many millions, he says, shaking his head, not meeting my eye. All creatures may have their dreams, even if they have nothing else.
He turns from me and strides into the darkness.
Follow your dreams, little owl.
Isolde! I call out after him through a mist of last hopes. Her name is Isolde! He hesitates then, but he does not turn. The eyes of all the royal court are on him as he pauses for just a moment. Then he breaks out into a run, and in another moment he is gone.